I messed up my camera angle while adjusting it, but we good. We're just gonna roll with it. Hello and welcome to the Horror Homestead. My name is GiBi, and this is the FNAF community update. I'm gonna be answering questions found in my comment section, as well as talking about some big important videos that came out in the last week or so. I had a video where I talked about the fact that in Sister Location, you unlock the true epilogue of the story by playing a non-canon DLC mode. That canon ending also referenced another non-canon alternate ending of the original Sister Location base game. I said this was bad puzzle making and storytelling, and it was very weird. This comment here says, Scott clarified that the Sister Location custom night cutscenes were canon in the Golden Freddy Updated live post on December 3rd, 2016. This is why there is no debate, as it is one of the few aspects of the game that was immediately clarified on whether it was canon or not. And that's great. My overall point in making that video was twofold. The first is that it's bad puzzle design. If Scott has to come out and clarify what it means, that is an admittance, that is clarification, that is stating directly by Scott that it was obviously so bad that he had to clear it up. If Scott has to come out and say this is the lore and the meaning, then it was poorly explained. The other point is that I said that if something similar to this happened in the Steel Wool era, where Scott is not going online and explaining what he meant by certain things in the games on his forum posts, then people would be arguing about what was canon and what it meant and all this other stuff. There would be different camps. So while this is a good point about the fact that it is the canon ending because Scott told us, that doesn't actually change the fact that it's bad. There's been a lot of talk about the DCI recently. I was just on a live stream where we talked about the DCI. Here's a detail I found when watching Candy Bunny. If we assume that Cassidy is helping Dave by setting up Happiest Day and altering his memories from his birthday, then this would show that the other 5 kids in the Happiest Day minigames were not other victims, as some like to assume. Charlie, the 4 MCI victims, the birthday cake, and the table are gray, yet the rest of the minigame is in color. This would imply that anything unaltered by Cassidy is in color, and everything gray would be altered by memory, would be an altered memory. Charlie and the 4 MCI victims weren't at Dave's party, but they are in this memory, so they can move on. This would show that the DCR kids aren't in Happiest Day, and another piece of data against their existence for those who assume they are in this minigame. So I think that when you're looking at something like the MCI characters are in black and, or the people throwing Dave the party, or whoever it is, it might be Cassidy. The people throwing the party are in black and white, and all the other kids sitting at the tables are in color, and some of the background decorations, like the balloons, are in color. I think that's a good thing to notice, but I don't necessarily think we can draw a solid conclusion from it. And whenever I say something like that, I don't mean that, like, this is wrong, and so we shouldn't make timelines from this. I mean that it's not so obvious that it should be stated as a universal fact that other people should draw their conclusions from. Right? Like, I made a controversial video about the fact that I think that FNAF 3 takes place in 2015. That is one of the very few things that I am so incredibly confident on that I would legitimately ask other FNAF theorists to stop making timelines on that not being the case. And then people didn't agree on it, because who am I to say that? But there's other things I put forth that I legitimately believe, like CASA DCI, that I don't think that we should all just accept because there's a lot of problems with it. There's a lot of alternative theories. And so for me to say, let's not believe in Lefty DCI, that's valueless, who cares about Lefty DCI? It's like, no, of course there's value to thinking Lefty DCI is true. Just because I don't doesn't mean that there's no value to it. And so just because I don't necessarily believe that everything gray in the Happiest Day means it's an altered memory as opposed to being real. Just because I don't believe that doesn't mean I don't think that you can base theories and timelines on it that could then be useful to other people in the community. Right? What I love about watching other people's timelines is that it makes me think of the story differently. And thinking of the story differently can give me insight into my own interpretation of it. I think that there's a possible interpretation of Happiest Day that the reason those people are gray is because they are the actual MCI victims. Because their souls are, like, split among a bunch of different robots. They're not, like, complete. Or maybe it's the exact other way around. Maybe the reason that they're gray is because they are actually full ghosts, whereas the people in color are memories from the crying child, from Dave, from the person receiving Happiest Day. If you can take a piece of evidence and interpret it in 2 exact opposite ways, in this case it's interpreting what black and white and what color mean, then I don't think that's a meaningful conclusion to draw. Again, you can build your own timelines and theories off of it, but that doesn't mean that it's like, oh, everyone should accept this because it's so obvious. GiBi, I've been thinking about Security Breach After Help Wanted 2 update. What if the black and white striped wires in the Pizzaplex were meant to be tiger-like stripes, and Storyteller is real, but Steel Wool was only told about it being black and white stripes, so now it's being confused as the puppet, and whatnot. Brilliant observation. In Security Breach, there's black and white wiring everywhere. I think John FNAF is the one who noticed it. They're like all on the ceiling and whatever, and people are like, oh my god, it's like the puppets arms. It's like tendrils. Maybe the puppet's in control of everything. Maybe the puppet's leading the Tangle, the Blob, the big mass of wires and Funtime Freddy's mask in the basement. Whereas, as this user is pointing out, it's very possible, because we know now that Scott just gave Steelwool some instructions on what to put in the Pizzaplex but didn't tell them what they meant. It's possible he said, put black and white stripe stuff everywhere, because he wanted to imply the Tiger Rock. And they're like, oh, black and white stripes? That means the puppet. And so now we have evidence pointing to one thing that was never intended. Very, very, very good observation. Love it. I recently covered the story The New Kid from Fazbear Frights, and at the end of that we discover that one of the characters, Kelsey, who over the course of the story gets put in a Springlock Fredbear suit and then dies, is actually like a ghost or something? Like the ending paragraph of the story is him at another school going to talk to loner kids, which is how he started the story. So he is a ghost. This person says, I haven't read the actual story, but my understanding of the ending is just a retelling of the beginning from Kelsey's perspective, showing how he saw the outcast kids and wanted to give them a chance, making the whole thing even sadder. So this interpretation would be that the ending of the story is actually now a loop from the beginning. The whole time we were kind of questioning Kelsey's motivation for hanging out with the loser outsider kids, and if the last paragraph is like, oh, from Kelsey's perspective, he was actually friendly, and he was nice, and he had no other motivations, that would solve people's issue that it's just about a ghost, and it would also just, as this person says, be significantly sadder if he was a nice kid the whole time. The problem with that is that this last paragraph we get from Kelsey's perspective is simply not what happens in the beginning of the story. This paragraph shows that he's going up to these two loner kids and saying, hey, is there any cool places to hang out around here? Whereas the way that the story actually began was Kelsey was a new kid and met the character Mick earlier in the day, and Mick then introduced him to the character Devin while they were in a classroom. So if this is somehow like a weird loop thing, then the two kids he approaches at school are not Mick and Devin. I think if it was meant to be interpreted that way, it would have been about Kelsey walking to school and hoping to meet some friends, and then he sees Mick and befriends Mick. This is like a repeat of the same kind of thing that happened, but it's not exactly the same, and so I just don't think that this is actually what was intended. It would be an odd way of writing that paragraph if we were supposed to interpret it this way. Remember how it's a common theory that the Mimic/Glitch Trap is trying to find replacements for the Afton family? That theory always places Vanessa as Elizabeth's replacement, but is there anything that would confirm this, that she's meant to be Elizabeth? People obviously think this because she's a girl, and that's basically it, as this person's pointing out again, once again, phenomenal observation. Let's see what they say. Because I've been thinking, in the movie, Elizabeth has a clear replacement, different version in Abby, while Vanessa instead seems to share the role of Michael alongside Mike. Could it be that this was Scott trying to push us into the direction of Vanessa from the games actually being Michael's replacement? After all, it's also a common theory that Michael was at one point an accomplice of William, and him going down to the sister location place at William's orders was his last mission under him before he rebelled. This could even be why Glitch Trap so thoroughly breaks Vanessa emotionally. He doesn't want a repeat of Michael breaking free of William's control. There's also their age. Gregory's a child, just like Crying Child, but people then claim the replacement of Elizabeth is an adult, even though Elizabeth also died when she was a child. Meanwhile, under this interpretation, both fit the ages of who they replace. Gregory is a kid like Crying Child, and Vanessa is an adult like Michael. Vanessa's grumpy attitude is also how a lot of people characterized Michael back when Crying Child was alive, but I know that's not actual evidence. Great observation, great interpretation. This is why I do think it's very important for different voices to speak out in the community, because yes, people do think Vanessa is Elizabeth. And that thought process begins because Vanessa is female. And that is it. There's really like nothing else. Maybe like she uses the word dad, whereas like Michael says father, right? Baby says daddy, Michael says father, and baby's Elizabeth kind of. But yeah, this would be interesting, because then like who is Elizabeth? Also, if we're talking about age stuff, that might actually imply that Crying Child is older than a lot of people think. Like, we don't know how old Gregory is, but I was on a live stream not too long ago with Candy Bunny and T-Dreads, and they seem to think that in FNAF 4, the Crying Child, Dave, was about 6 years old. I always put him as older, but if Gregory is supposed to be like a Dave stand-in, he is clearly not 6 years old. So that would also be interesting. He does wear a striped shirt and all that stuff, right? Although maybe that's just something Steelwool put in? Like maybe they wanted to make a story where he parallels the Crying Child, but Scott didn't intend that? Nothing in Security Breach makes sense anymore. I think Scott really needs to like actually clear up what was intended and what was not. I think we need Security Breach 2. Son of a Breach. If you have an interpretation of how old you think the Crying Child was in FNAF 4, leave it in the comments below. You can also leave questions for the next FNAF community update. Before we go, I want to recommend 2 videos I watched this week that I think were phenomenal and give really good insight into the FNAF franchise. One of them, Return to the Pit Solved FNAF Into the Pit by Absol X Guardian, is extremely well researched, and it's very clear that they have deep knowledge of FNAF and the community. I think it's a great video. It goes over the differences between Into the Pit the game, the short story, and then Return to the Pit. Great video, great production, could not recommend higher. I think I say that a lot, that I couldn't recommend things higher. It's like an A-tier video. The other one is by Zeto Rocks. I solved Five Nights at Freddy's 4 original stories. It was never Dream Theory, FNAF Theory. Both of these will be linked in the description. This one is pretty clear what it's about. And I also agree that Dream Theory was never a theory, FNAF Theory. Please be sure to be nice to each other in the comments, including the comments of other people's videos. Consider supporting the creators you admire. I always have my Patreon linked in the description, as well as channel memberships that don't really do anything but they give you a badge. Never lose sight of the things that are important to you, and remember that Freddy's stands for Friendly, Respectful Engagement, Discussion, and Discourse Yields Success. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time, and you can also check me out on some live streams over on T-Dread's channel. Goodbye.